And what happens now? Microsoft gets a hard no from the government. Union efforts are mushrooming. And speaking of food, do our Salish Sea orcas have a right to eat? And what about the predators who eat what orcas eat? And what about the people who eat what protected mammals eat? Welcome to Friday, and welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. You are about to catch up on what happened locally this week with an engaging panel of journalists. So before you do, please get your affairs in order. Just take a couple of minutes and pay a little sliver of the bill at KUOW.org. Here to help me help you is KUOW's arts and culture reporter, Mike Davis. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Bill. How's it going today?
It's good. It'd be especially good if we can make some progress on this pledge drive, final day.
Well, I think we can, Bill. We've been doing so good all day long. People have been calling in 206-543-9595. People have been going to KUOW.org. And there are so many reasons for people to give, Bill. It's hard for me to think of one. But since I have you here, I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay. What is one reason why people should give? What will they get for their contributions?
Well, I mean, they're going to get a thank you gift if they so choose. You go to online and you can see about that. Yeah, you just can see the pictures of the bear, the bear with the spectacles on the KUOW t-shirt,
the tote bag.
Yeah, the tote bag. So many choices. Yes, the beanie. Yes. I would say the greatest, and of course they get the radio that they listen to. I mean, you want to invest in the thing, in the utility
they do want
you
us
use.
To be here.
They'd want us to talk. But I think the feeling of giving something to your entire community, not everybody's in a position to support KUOW. So the way it works is that when we can, we do.
So if you want to get that tote bag, that beanie, or to support Bill and I and our colleagues, call 206-543-9595 or log on to KUOW.org.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, let's get at the news of the week. And I want to introduce my colleagues. Seattle Times environment reporter Isabella Breda is with us. Hi, nice to have you here in person.
Hey, happy to be here.
Nice to have Marcus Harrison Green. Good to have you in person. Thanks
Always
for being
here.
Always
a joy, Bill. Always a joy.
South Seattle Emerald, Seattle Times. We've got Crosscut Central and Eastern Washington reporter Hoang. You're on the east side of the Cascades. Great to see you on my laptop.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you here. And you can watch the show yourself when you go to, it's on Facebook or on YouTube. Just search KUOW Public Radio. Let's get at our first topic today. You know that Washington State was one of the first states to legalize same-sex marriage by popular vote. And so it was exactly 10 years ago today, 140 couples came to Seattle City Hall for a joyous public day of weddings. Among them were Seattle couple Robin Wiss and Danielle Young, who said she had thought this day could never come.
When I came out when I was 14, one of the things that was hardest for me at that time was this feeling that I'd never be able to get married. It was like this, I had this, kind of regret and sadness about that. It's 18 years later and here we are. It's so fabulous.
Well, that right to marriage seems shakier now with the U.S. Supreme Court overturning the federal abortion right. Justice Clarence Thomas suggested that maybe same-sex marriage should be reconsidered as well. So this week, the U.S. House of Representatives passed legislation to officially protect same-sex and also interracial unions. This is not a requirement that every state legally marries same-sex couples.
Yeah, it simply says that you have to recognize the marriage of all couples in whatever state they got married in. So, for example, if you have residents got married in Washington State, where same-sex marriage is recognized, then you have to also recognize that marriage. But you do not have to grant the marriages yourself, or the state does not have to grant the marriages.
Right. And this law also says nonprofit religious organizations don't have to provide services for a same-sex wedding.
Right. And that was a key part of getting the Senate to actually pass. That's an additional note, is that actually on this yesterday, or the House and the Senate. Yeah, that was a key part of getting that through, I think, making it a bipartisan effort.
Right. On the way to the president's desk.
Mm-hmm.
What other questions, information, what else should our listeners know about this action in D.C., something that Washington State did on its own 10 years ago today?
I think you made that point earlier, is that, I think the urgency, the Supreme Court decision on, abortion, and then the speculation whether the Supreme Court would actually take away same-sex marriage. I think for some context, there was a federal law in place from the Defense of Marriage Act from the 1990s, which was made unconstitutional by the Supreme Court in 2015. And so there was speculation that they would attempt to overturn that ruling. And so in essence, passing this law makes it a federal law as opposed to, kind of being at the mercy of, a judicial court decision.
And your colleague at Crosscut talked to people who got married at that Seattle City Hall event 10 years ago.
Yeah. So we had a story in Crosscut about couples that were married and at that ceremony, and one of the couples was Sarah and Emily Coffer of Arlington, and they talked about, I think one of the things that really interested me was kind of the evolution of that community. They talked about how when they first got married, they're from Snohomish County. It's very conservative, a much more conservative county compared to King County. They would get kind of a look when, they would introduce each other as, or as wives, that this is my wife, right? And they said that they've gotten less of those looks over time. And, and that there's just generally just more embrace for same-sex couples, that, even conservatives are, I think it's not an issue for conservatives as much, which is probably why it's not surprising to see, a bipartisan vote. As the report noted in the radio earlier, that just one person in the congressional digression voted against it. So I think it really shows kind of the evolution of how people see same-sex marriage. 10 years ago, it was it's wild. It was a wild. Some people did not support it. There was a lot of people that did not support it, and so it's really interesting to see. But I think it also shows just how long it takes. I mean, we're talking 10 years and we're finally getting, a law that brings us to the federal level.
Yeah, that one no vote in Washington was Kathy McMorris Rogers of Spokane. And that included, it was a yes vote from the outgoing Republican, Jamie Herrera Butler. And anything, Marcus or Isabella, anything to add or ask?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious on, I know the only lesbian member of Congress, Tammy Baldwin, she said that this would, definitely guarantee that same-sex couples could be guaranteed that their, expression of love would be upheld here in the United States. But what's stopping what many people look at as an activist court of, ruling this unconstitutional still, right? I mean, I was thinking about there's, in 1986, that's on the books, that there was, I believe it was called Bowers versus Hardwick, where the Supreme Court at that time said that it was unconstitutional for two men to engage in, consensual sexual activity. So, what guarantees that a Supreme Court couldn't look at this and say this law is unconstitutional?
Yeah, is there a guarantee? Is the idea that if it's unconstitutional at a federal level, if it's does that law that says states have to recognize marriage where it's legally performed, so that in effect sort of stands against any such erosion? Mai, do you know the answer to that?
I don't know the answer to that. And I think Marcus has a good point that, after all, there was a ruling in 2015 that made DOMA unconstitutional. So I think it's a valid question. I do think that given how the law was written, given that you're not forcing kind of a federal, like all state, you're not forcing states to recognize marriage, rather just recognize the states. I mean, it's just, with the abortion thing, that argument was states' rights. And, essentially this law is written in a way to say, hey, you don't have, they're kind of leaving it up to the state to decide whether to recognize marriage. It's just saying, if you have a resident that got recognized in another state that does, you have to recognize it. So I think the way it's written, I think it would be harder to overturn it. I mean, that's my opinion. I'm not a legal expert, but yeah, just based on comparing it to how they overturned Roe versus Wade and kind of made that a states' rights issues, I think the law is written in a way where it does empower the states. And it also, I think the fact that there is that amendment that says, hey, if you're a religious entity, you don't have to, perform, you have some say. So I think it'd be hard for a Supreme Court to like kind of tear it apart, because there are a lot of things that, that are in there that makes it harder to overturn it, I think.
Okay, well, let's pause there. This is on the president's desk for signature after a passage in the House and the Senate. 10 years after Washington State was one of the first, was it Massachusetts first, I think, but then Washington State by popular vote, along with Maryland, maybe Maine, one of the first states to legalize same-sex marriage here. And so 10 years on, that's the action under the Biden administration. We are going to take a pause here on KUOW and continue recapping the news this week. We're going to talk about unions popping up and the response to it, even in the tech world, when we come right back on Week in Review. Support for KUOW comes from the Estate Litigation Group at Ryan Swanson Law, celebrating 125 years of serving clients in the Northwest. Lawyers advocating on behalf of estates and heirs in a variety of trust and estate disputes. Online at ryanswansonlaw.com. Hi, I'm Bill Radke, host of KUOW's Week in Review, inviting you to our Year in Review live event in Seattle. On Thursday, December 15th, my special guest and I will commemorate 2022. The politics, the unions, the weather, the quarterbacks. Get your tickets today at kuow.org/events. Support for KUOW comes from Taproot Theater, presenting The Wickhams, Christmas at Pemberley, a new Jane Austen-inspired Christmas play. The Darcys and Bennetts are gathered upstairs, but downstairs, the staff are hiding a holiday secret. Through December 30th. More at taproottheater.org. You are with Week in Review on KUOW Seattle, listener-supported KUOW. I might add, I'm Bill Radke. We're going to continue recapping the news this week. I want to let you know that our goal this hour, our fundraising goal, started out as 30 listeners for Week in Review. And arts and culture reporter Mike Davis, we've got 25 left to go.
Oh, we're making progress, Bill. We're making a lot of good progress.
And well, let's see. We should tell people, I suppose, I don't want to assume everybody knows how this works, but you probably know by now that KUOW, that you don't have to pay the whole bill. We're not asking you to pay everything, the cost of all the reporters and editors and NPR programming, but you go to KUOW.org or you call 206-543-9595 and you decide how much you can chip in.
Yes. And you know, our listeners don't pay all of it, Bill, but they sure do contribute a lot. We are like over 90% community supported.
Right.
That's major. But guess what I have right now?
What's that?
I got some testimonials. I got 3 people that gave and sent us a note just, you know, to give us a little encouragement. Can I read some of those, Bill?
Would you?
Oh, of course. Molly in Burien says, I've listened every day for over 30 years. I'm now in a financial position to pay for it. So happy to hear that, Molly. Mm-hmm. And Molly is glad to do it on the last day of our member drive. Better late than never. Molly, yes. And thank you so much. Times are hard, Bill. So people like Molly, appreciate them.
Yeah. Agree. Molly gets it. You do it when you can. You know, now maybe you can't, but when you can, Molly says, I'm in.
Yes.
That's great.
Better
thank
late
you.
than never. We have Lynn from Port Ludlow. And Lynn says, thank you for all you do to keep us informed with truthful, investigative journalism and stories that make our lives richer and sometimes make us laugh and cry. I am proud to be a sustaining member of KUOW. Lynn, thank you so much. That means a lot. On Week in Review, you always ask people what makes them smile.
Yes. I have to, because sometimes the news isn't going to do it for you. The news isn't going to smile itself sometimes, but there is hope and delight and surprise in the world.
Yes. And I'm so glad that Lynn gets that. We are so glad that you laugh, you cry, and you smile with us. And I have one more from Karen in Seattle. And Karen says, I'm a sustaining member, but wanted to give extra to support your effort. I value your integrity and reporting. Thank you. Karen, special shout out to Karen. Karen is already a member, Bill, but she gave extra. That says a lot.
That says a lot. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. I feel like we've done it. I feel like we've made the case. It's the final day of our pledge drive. What else do you need to be somebody who chips this number down? We started with 30. We're down to 25 people left to go in this hour, and the hour is going to go by quick. I try to make sure of that. So right now, please, area code 206-543-9595, or go to KUOW.org And please leave one of those thoughtful messages, and we like passing them on.
Yes, we need listener support from everybody out there so that we can continue having shows like Week in Review, so you can have this panel of our esteemed colleagues who come in and break down the news. You guys are about to get a really special treat this hour. I got a sneak peek into what's coming up. We have to make sure that this continues. We cannot do this without you all. So, Bill, one more time, can you please just let the people know where they can go if they want to support?
Thank you. Finally, it's kuow.org. And if you're a phone type, talk to a person type, thank you. 206-543-9595. Mike, will you come back in a bit?
I will be
with
here.
An update. Okay.
Of course.
All right. Let's continue rolling on with the news of the week with Seattle Times and South Seattle Emerald columnist Marcus Green and Seattle Times environment reporter Isabella Breda, Crosscut Central and Eastern Washington reporter by Hoang. And I'm your host, Bill Radke. We're doing the live stream on YouTube and Facebook. Just search KUOW Public Radio. Okay. This week, the Federal Trade Commission said it will sue to stop Microsoft from making its biggest acquisition ever. For $69 billion, Microsoft is trying to buy Activision Blizzard, which makes the Call of Duty video game series. Marcus, when you agreed to come on KUOW's Week in Review, you swore an oath to explain this FTC action. Marcus, will you now answer that Call of Duty?
I certainly will. Certainly will, Bill.
Thank you.
I see what you did there. I see what you did there too. So to help explain this whole thing, I did some scientific research. I went to my nephew and to my young cousin. Mm-hmm. They are both gamers. I have both bought them guilt gifts, from Activision Blizzard in the past. Essentially, what we have here, and just to set the table, is we are talking about this industry you're talking about the video game industry that is $90.2 billion in the US. Worldwide, that's 200 billion. Just for contrast, the movie and film industry, which every single week we're like, what's the number one movie in the world? Yada, yada, yada. The movie and film industry is only 25.8 billion. Which nothing to sneeze at. That's 25.8 billion, give or take $5 that I don't have. Uh-huh. But
that's a great illustration.
But at the end of the day, this is basically what the government is trying to say, is that if Microsoft ends up buying Activision, which is right now the number 9 video game maker in the world, it will by default take over as the number 2 video game maker in the world from Sony. Now, here's the thing. Microsoft is worth $1.8 trillion with a T, for T for the nice monopolist, like some people say, compared to Sony, which is only relatively only $100 billion. That's all that Sony is worth. What the FTC is saying is that ultimately Microsoft can artificially prop up its video game division so that at the end of the day, it doesn't need to innovate, doesn't need to create new titles like Sony does. It can use the profits from its Microsoft Office software, which it makes $30 billion a year off of, and presto changeo, essentially have this wonderful monopoly in this $200 billion industry. What it can also do is if this does end up going through and it buys Activision, or the merger, I should say, goes through, then that means like a game like Call of Duty, which is the prevailing number 1 video game franchise in the world, it can essentially make it exclusive to Microsoft consoles. That means that Sony's PlayStation would not be able to have this game. So it can artificially also hurt Sony's market share, because I can tell you my young nephew loves his Call of Duty. Loves it so much that he really, really needs to go ahead and apply for a job, which he has not done, but I'm, whatever. It's just, I'm browbeating him on air. Yes, because I want you to get a job. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. But essentially what this does is it says it can essentially squeeze them out of the market. If more and more of the games that people want to play aren't on Sony, it's like, why in the world would you buy a Sony? Now Microsoft is saying like, no, we want this game to be in the hands of as many people as possible. However, they've already said this and done the opposite. A few years ago, they bought Bethesda Games, which out in the Europe, it's a European game developer. They at that time told the European Union regulators that, no, we promise you that we'll make these games available to everybody. Intel, psych, the merger ended up going through,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, those games were now exclusive only to Microsoft consoles. And Microsoft has bought 10 gaming publishers and done the same exact thing.
Okay.
Now, what Microsoft, to their credit or discredit, however you look at it, they're saying that, look, yes, this could potentially look like a monopoly if you just take gaming consoles, right? There's really only Microsoft's Xbox, and there's Sony's PlayStation. There's also a Nintendo Switch, but that's almost in its own category. But they're saying that no, the gaming industry is larger than that. It's also phones, right? And who has control over like gaming when it comes to phones? It's Apple.
That would be Apple.
And exactly. And it's Google with their Android system.
Mhm.
And they can charge a huge toll, and they do something like 30% of profits, 30%, I should say, of profits for many gaming developers. And they're saying, no, we're just trying to, like, we're not the bad guy. Don't look at the, pay no attention to the man in the box over here. Look at this monopoly over here.
Uh-huh.
And so this is basically going to come down to, what do you believe? Do you think that this, does spur and create that additional competition, or do you think that this is, or does the judge who'll be overseeing this case, do they think that, this is a play essentially for Microsoft to get rid of the majority of its competition in the gaming space?
Okay. Excellent. Thank you for that explanation, because I, unlike your nephew, would have had trouble following if I hadn't had that laid out for me. So I get that now. And from conventional wisdom is that Microsoft's probably going to fight this and try to keep this acquisition going.
Yes.
I want to see because you told me something about Microsoft and unionization, which has been like one of the words of 2022. So I want to segue into this. Is in fact, there's another gaming company that Microsoft did buy,
yes,
where there is a unionization vote. I think it's still going on, and you were interested in that and Microsoft's reaction to it.
Yes. So there's a subsidiary of Microsoft called ZeniMax. It's a quality assurance team. So essentially, the people who play video games and test video games, as my dad would say, is that an actual job? No, it actually is. They are moving to try and unionize, and they actually have a vote scheduled by the end of this month. They are recognized by the Communication Workers of America Association. That same association, lo and behold, the plot thickens, is petitioning the government to actually go ahead with the merger of Activision and Microsoft. They're saying that this would actually allow more bargaining power for its workers, which in some ways, for some people, that flies in the face of conventional wisdom, that you need more competition and more companies then allows for better bargaining power. But
right.
There are some people who see this as a strategy of Microsoft saying, hey, they reached this deal with this union saying that they would voluntarily honor the union, which other tech giants like Amazon and Meta have not done, if essentially the union comes out in support of this merger. It is fairly, you could look at it as a very shrewd move. You could also look at it as, Microsoft, again, being one of, relatively being a, shall we say, gold standard, or Mr. Rogers, if you will, of tech behemoths, and actually supporting its labor force. Yeah,
that's unusual stance these days. From in and outside of the tech industry, that reaction to unionization. So, since we're talking about unions, I want to bring my Hoang back in here because I want to know why there was a mushroom rally at Met Market in Seattle in Lower Queen Anne recently. We're talking unions again.
Yes, we are. So late last month, there was workers from Ostrom Mushroom Farms. They work in Sunnyside, which is in the lower Yakima Valley. And for the last few months,
be in Thurston County, by the way.
It used to be in Lacey, yes, actually for decades. And then in 2019, they built a new facility in Sunnyside, and the workers are in Sunnyside. So for the last few months, they've been working to unionize. They are looking to unionize under the United Farm Workers. And So they've been working on that. And one of the challenges is that unlike a lot of other unions, for example, the workers at ZeniMax, for example, they are excluded from the National Labor Relations Act, which means they can't go to NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, and force the company's hand to unionize. So they have to find other ways to force the company's hand. And so one way to do that is to get community support. So Metropolitan Market is one of many grocery stores that stock mushrooms that are produced by Austrian mushrooms. So the idea is go to Seattle, let the shoppers know, hey, we're trying to organize. And if you care about workers and you care about the food you eat being ethical, you should support our unionizing efforts. So that is why they were in Seattle, and they're planning to continue this. They said they were planning to go to Portland, where Austrian mushrooms are also sold. So they're looking to get some community support and get, because again, they can't use, NLRB to force the hand. So they're trying to kind of, use good old PR to get the company to voluntarily recognize their union.
Well, what would a Seattle shopper do about that if they did care?
Well, they could they could not buy the mushrooms. They could go call Austrian mushrooms and say, hey, if you want, you should care, or speak out and say, hey, I care about how my food is made. And I saw these workers. And so, yeah, they could, in theory, the community could, send a note to Ostrom and say, hey, or they can, support the union in other ways. And so I think it's just, you vote with your dollar.
Right. Okay. So that's going on right now in Lower Yakima Valley, this attempt to organize. Isabella Breda, we're going to start talking about the feeding that happens under the waves.
Oh, beautiful.
In a moment. Yeah. When we come back from a break, will you tell us what's going on with the arguably legal rights of the Southern resident orca and pull some pinnipeds into the discussion as well?
Sure.
Excellent.
Anytime.
Okay, you're listening to Week in Review. We're recapping some of the really interesting things that have gone on this week, as we do every week. We've got Marcus Harrison Green here, Isabella Breda, Mai Hoang, and we're going to come right back. Mike Davis, I hope. Are you going to give us an update? Some new information on this pledge drive in just a moment?
I have an exciting update.
Oh, okay. Then don't go away.
Support for KUOW comes from the Association of Washington Business Health Choice Trust, providing a wide variety of healthcare plans for small and mid-sized businesses through Primera Blue Cross. Learn more at propointservices.com.
Hey, this is Patricia Murphy, host of Seattle Now. We're here for you every weekday morning at 6 to keep you connected to your city during these winter months with fascinating stories, local news, and perspectives from your neighbors, all in 15 minutes or less. Listen to Seattle Now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Support for KUOW comes from Amazon, partnering with Seattle and Bellevue Public Schools to provide direct funding for urgent needs like food, clothing, and school supplies for students and families in need through its Right Now Needs Fund.
You're listening to Week in Review on KUOW. I'm Bill Radke. Maybe you listen every single Friday. Maybe you've been listening for years. Who knows? It's time. Doesn't matter. It's time right now on the final day of this membership drive for you to be an investor, for you to be someone who helps make this show and all our programming happen. I'm here, first of all, with a website, kuow.org, a phone number, 206-543-9595, and a colleague, KUOW Arts and Culture reporter, Mike Davis. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Bill.
What's the update? You promised me that you had something to tell us.
I promised, and it is exciting. We are only halfway through our hour so far. We had a goal of 30 listeners, and we only need 10 more to reach that goal, Bill. We are almost there.
Okay, this is happening.
It's happening. I feel like we're batting 1,000 right now. It's like every hour that I've been here, we've hit all our goals. This is amazing.
Well, then it must be you.
Yeah, collecting money is fun.
Well, for example, is there anyone else we can meet who went to kuow.org or called us at 543-9595?
Yes, we can. New members are rolling in, Bill. We have Monica in Seattle, and Monica says, I love that KUOW keeps me up to date without any slant or bias, just honest truth. Monica, thank you so much. Monica, you must be listening right now. You must have just heard that last segment because that's exactly.
I was about to say the same thing. Marcus is laying out the whole thing. Well, it depends on who you believe, how you look at it. This is what they say. This is what they say. Yes.
Yes. And we also have Craig from Tacoma. Love when we get those South Sound listeners. I learned so much about the world just by listening to KUOW. Craig, I'm so happy that we can do that for you. And we got one more, Bill. Okay. That's not even all. We have another one.
All right. They keep coming. Good.
Come on. We got Lucinda from Redmond. And Lucinda says, I just donated because I support free speech and access to reliable, trustworthy information for all. Lucinda, thank you so much. That is exactly what we're trying to do here. And Bill, I'm supposed to say why people should donate. And, I don't think there's anything more than I can say than listen to the rest of the show right now. You want to hear truth to power. You want to hear journalists. We got some of our partners from the Times, some of our partners from the South Seattle Emerald, and we are here doing exactly what we do at KUOW, giving you the news and information that you need. But Bill, they need to know how they can donate. Where do they go? That's it. Bottom line then, it's KUOW.org. You got two options, KUOW.org, or you call 206-543-9595. Thank you, Mike. Update in a few minutes, I hope? Update in a few minutes. Okay. So back with, yes, the Seattle Times. Yes, South Seattle Emerald. Yes, Crosscut, bringing you Week in Review and live streaming the show on YouTube and on Facebook. So this week, the city of Port Townsend proclaimed that our southern resident orcas have legal rights. The first time a U.S. city's done that I know of, Isabella. What legal rights did Mayor David Faber confer upon the whales?
Sure. So basically, he was laying out that they have the right, kind of like we would expect, to eat and to live without being taunted or harmed and swim through their normal habitat, just like basically the right to exist. It didn't necessarily put anything into action. It wasn't an executive order saying do these things. It just said, hey, we can treat these guys like equals, and we should. And why haven't we? But the biggest thing that came out of this is this realization that a lot of these things that were outlined, the right to eat food, their normal and wild caught food, which would be Chinook salmon, that's their number one food source, they're not really there or available. Some of these rights just currently don't exist from overharvest, from pollution, from generations of human action that have knocked down and debilitated some of these salmon populations. We have boat traffic that makes it hard for these orcas to hunt, and those boat tones come out at the same range that they use to communicate with each other. So that leads to them getting separated and lost. I mean, it's just, there's a laundry list of things that they currently don't have access to.
Even though, don't they kind of have legal rights under the Endangered Species Act, Marine Mammal Protection Act?
Sure. It's like, okay, well, we can't hunt them and we can't taunt them and your boat can't come too close to them. But just the sheer amount of boat traffic coming through, the things that we have permitted have harmed orca populations over the years.
And Hoang, you were wondering something that I wondered too, which is what could the effect of this sort of the logic of declaration of rights mean for projects?
Yeah, I'm curious from like a business end because as you mentioned, the businesses do things, boats. There's so much human activity that prevents orcas from doing those basic things, and so I'm just curious how this translates to like a regulations for business, to build any number of things, in the ocean or to do activity in the ocean.
Sure. And we haven't, this is the first, as far as we know, the first U.S. city to do anything like this, to really recognize a marine mammal as equal and their inherent rights. But the potential is it could open the door for other legislation to come out. We saw actually just yesterday, the House passed Rick Larson's bill that would expand the Marine Mammal Protection Act. It would allocate some funding to the Coast Guard to continue to study the effects of like sound pollution underwater, set stricter vessel like boat regulations. So you can't go above a certain speed in some areas. Maybe boats won't even be allowed to travel in some areas anymore if it's potentially harmful.
Yeah, imagine outlawing whale watching. Or as I call it, whale bothering.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of an institution here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought of that actually because I was thinking like orcas like provide so much entertainment, and I know this sounds kind of funny, but like they really don't have any say. Like we're just like watching them, and and it's like like we never think about like how does that disturb their like day-to-day life. I mean, and so that was actually one of the things I kind of thought about because it's such a popular activity, in that end of the state. So
yeah. Marcus, any information, any questions along these lines?
Yes, I have to say, and great work, Isabella, as well. And I'm asking this like in earnest. I promise you. I was reading some of the proclamation and the declaration, and it said these rights include but are not limited to the right to life, autonomy, culture, free and safe passage, adequate food supply from naturally occurring sources, and freedom from conditions causing physical, emotional, and mental harm, including a habitat degraded by noise, pollution, and contamination. And I had to just wonder, can Black folks get in on this? Like, is it going down like this in Port Townsend? I mean, what's going on?
I don't know much about the city of Port Townsend, but it'd be great, if small cities, especially like Port Townsend, could consider these things for everyone, but we'll have to see.
All right.
Well, we're talking about rights here. And I will want to know, so Isabella, the orcas, if they could have a legal right to food, but if the salmon they eat, as you said, are not there or are endangered, do the salmon have a right to live? And what about the seals and the sea lions? What are their rights to prey on the salmon who want to live? Well, how does that go?
Sure. Well, I think since the Marine Mammal Protection Act in 1972, seals and sea lions have had some of the greatest protections of like maybe any species. I mean, even as Marcus was calling out, like, can everyone get in on the access to the protections that they have? Who knows? But we saw a lot of the populations balloon, like California sea lions since the Marine Mammal Protection Act until like 2015, the 2010s went from 50,000 to 300,000. And those are the guys that travel along the West Coast. There's also like native stellar sea lions, and those populations have exploded up north in the San Juans. You can go and see hundreds on like haul out sites at any point. Same with seal populations, those like more than quadrupled all in and around the Salish Sea. So like the protections worked really well, but in the process of that, I think we realized that they're one of the top predators of salmon, and we're currently trying to restore salmon populations. And maybe we have to reevaluate how that's working. Like, should we be putting marine mammals specifically, unintentionally above salmon? Like, is that what's been happening? There's been studies done in different estuaries that have shown, I think specifically like in the Deschutes and the Nisqually, that like 90% of predation on salmon in that area came from seals, and about 20% of the salmon coming through there were dying. So we're seeing, that's just what it looks like from the outside, that the marine mammals are getting more protection than the salmon.
And tribal rights are big here. They have treaty rights,
right?
And I think was it the Trump administration allowed some Native American tribes to kill sea lions if they get a permit along the Columbia system, maybe? So the Columbia management is not just specifically tribes, but like DFW has been euthanizing some sea lions
Department
for a while
of Fish
now.
and Wildlife.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else do we cover the short version?
Sure.
Yeah. Of this. The rights of predators and prey and people too. On Week in Review, we're going to get into something that has made us or allowed us to smile this week. And before we smile, Marcus, I want to talk about a piece that you're working on. This was the first full week back in operation for the Postman, the mailing and shipping business in Seattle Central District. Its co-owner, Devon Pickett, was fatally shot in October. Devon was so loved and respected that there was the response to his death was this very public, what we in the media call an outpouring of grief. What you notice is how greatly bottled up and unresolved our grief can be.
Yeah, and I think especially around the holidays, there was a recent survey that said about a third of Americans say that they don't look forward to the holidays because they conjure up memories of lost loved ones. And I think that underscores the fact that we don't really know how to talk about grief in Western culture, right? We don't have a vocabulary for it. And I was just thinking about, I mean, you brought up Devon, but I mean, there's been other tragedies that have happened. There's, Jordan Jackson, the Bellevue officer who was killed. There's
a collision, a motorcycle collision.
Right, excuse me, a collision. And there's been an uptick in gun violence that has been talked about. Have been members of our unhoused community who have passed on. This is just here in the greater Seattle area. And the fact is that, I think the piece that I'm doing now is about how we can try to be a model for how we discuss and talk about grief. You have to understand that all of this, not only are we talking about the last, 2.5 something years coming out of the pandemic, but we're just talking about a culture where we continuously sort of have a move on and get over it attitude, right? As opposed to in some Eastern cultures where it's like, no, grief is going to be with you for a while. And grief is a complex emotion. It is nonlinear. It doesn't have necessarily an expiration date. And I think the fact that we don't have an ability at times or we feel shame, I should say, in holding on to grief or having it for longer than a week or two. I want to be, full disclosure. I had my youngest brother passed away about a month ago in an accident. He died from carbon monoxide poisoning. And just
I'm so sorry, Marcus.
Thank you. And just last week I was at something, people were asking me how I was doing, and I put on sort of this social concealer, if you will, of, oh, I'm doing great, and I have a smile, and no, I'm not. It hurts like hell. It still hurts like hell. And I think the fact that in our society, many times we have these phrases that are very well intentioned, but they can be insensitive of, this was meant to be, or things happen for a reason, are there been a better place? When what we can do is something that I think, like in doing this piece, that I've realized is that the sort of antidote for grief isn't sort of false hope, but I think the antidote for grief is faith, right? A faith in each other, a faith that we are here, the faith that we can carry this pain, but we don't have to carry it alone. And an example I give is my partner. She texted me a couple of days ago, and she said, I don't know what to say right now, because I was just telling her how depressed I was feeling. And she said, but I do know that I am committed to loving you, committed to listening to you, and committed to being available to you. And I think in this society, especially at this time right now, that this is the season of giving. So the gift that we can give, that's the best gift, is knowing that we are here for each other, right? I mean, why do we do any of this? Why are we meeting together? Why are we talking about the news? It's because we are here for other people. And I think we don't show that enough many times in our society. We don't show that we are there for each other enough. And ultimately, I would just say, for anybody listening, I think the best thing that you can do for anybody this holiday season, if you have a friend or if you yourself are in a situation where you're feeling down or emotionally fraught, I think it's reaching out, knowing that you're not alone, and having somebody else express that.
Thank you for expressing that. I'm looking forward to reading this piece. Where are we going to be able to read it?
It will definitely be in the South Seattle Emerald. I'm hoping as well in the Seattle Times, but we'll see.
Okay. Thanks for that. Can we hold that together? Grief and joy, or grief and delight. We always end the show wanting to know what did, besides each other, and that's most of it. What happened this week to fill you back up? Could you even feel it? You talked about how you're just, you're down right now. So were you also able to feel joy?
Yeah. I mean, I think I forgot what the quote is, but it says, pain of grief is as much a part of life as the joy of love. Right. And so, life is very much, symmetrical, I guess, in that way. And I think even just not to sound flippant, but I think just being here right now and seeing y'all's faces and hearing your voice again, Bill, that's it's a microcosm of joy, but it's I should say it's a micro moment of joy, but it's joy nonetheless.
I feel that joy too. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you've been here over the years together now that we've been talking together on KUOW. So thank you.
Same, and it's good to know that that in this, I believe there's a New York Times article about men having a friend recession.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I think it's 1 in 7 men who say they don't have a close friend or any friends at all. It's good to have a friend in you, sir. So thank you.
Thank you. What else can you leave us with that made you smile this week, Isabella or Mai? Yes,
yeah,
Mom.
I was wondering if I could jump in. So I was actually I wasn't planning on sharing this, but I think it's very appropriate given what we're talking about. I love what makes me smile is just knowing that Bill, you provided the space to talk about grief. And speaking of holidays, so Halloween, I was out trick-or-treating with my daughter, and we stopped at a house, and this house did this activity. It was like, and basically it was they were making a luminaria, which is these bags where you put the candle in, and then you kind of it's very common in like cancer rallies and things like that. So anyway, one holiday that's very celebrated in Latino cultures is Dia de los Muertos, where you honor the dead. And so they had these bags with these masks, and you could color the masks. And the idea was you put a name of a lost one, a loved one that you lost. And this woman was gonna put all these different bags in front of her house. And the reason she was doing it was that she had lost her son, her 3-year-old son, and her son loved Halloween. And for her, this was a way to kind of honor her son, but also kind of give that space for others to, express their grief and to mourn, but also celebrate their loved ones. And so yeah, I just loved hearing your story, Marcus. I loved hearing about your piece, and because I think we need more of those community spaces where we don't forget about our loved ones, and where we can, have an outlet, and so holidays aren't, a sad, or I mean, it's okay to be sad. I'm saying that, that we acknowledge loss during the holidays. And I thought that was a really cool way. And so, yeah, I was really touched. My daughter put her Aunt Sandra, because she died a couple years ago. I put a friend I lost during the pandemic. And so I just really appreciated, especially knowing that she had experienced a loss and that she was able to kind of share that with us. And that I felt a connection with this woman, even though I don't really know her. But yeah, it was really cool. So.
Yeah, grief and celebration they're intertwined. Isabella, is there anything you want to share with us too?
Well, I'm just grateful we made space for this conversation to end off today. Yeah. I think a lot of people probably needed to hear that right now, myself included. So thanks, Marcus.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. And it's a good chance to remind people that the show is it's about people. The news is about people. We have these other categories and these other nouns, but we're about people. I appreciate our producer of the show this week, Kevin Kniestedt, and the help we get from Juan Pablo Chiquiza and Tio Popescu when it comes to sharing this program on social media, live streaming the program as we do. And we couldn't do it without you. There's no show without you or without Bernard Willett operating the program on the audio board here. So thank you for being with us for another week of Week in Review. And before we end, we've got just a few minutes left in the hour. I want to turn to my colleague, KUOW Arts and Culture reporter Mike Davis, who's been listening and updating us and encouraging you to be a part of this show.
Yes. All of that was great. I appreciate all of those moments that they shared. And I want to share a moment right now with you all who are listening. We are one person left from our goal of 30 listeners for this hour, Bill.
One person to go.
We're going to do it. I think we're going to do it.
Okay. So just text yourself and tell yourself, hey, we're going to do this now. We're going to put them over the top. All they need is one membership. And it's us.
One more. I almost did it myself after that last segment, Bill. I was so inspired. I almost pulled my phone out. But I want to give one of you all out there the opportunity. And I know that all of you have had these moments where you think, I was listening to KUOW and I heard this story. And we just want you all to know that that's what KUOW is all about. It's the stories, the news, the context, the insights, the perspectives, the people, as you mentioned. And we want to make you stop and think and start your own meaningful conversations. And in order for us to do that, we're going to need some of y'all to call 206-543-9595 or go online to KUOW.org.
I just I was telling you, because Mike is our arts and culture reporter. So I follow his coverage of the shows that are going on around the region. You were at Act Theater recently. I was at Act Theater last night. I watched Christmas Carol. And I was thinking, what if Scrooge had suddenly, after being dragged through the streets of Seattle, suddenly realizes that it's the final day of the pledge drive, and he hasn't missed it after all. You there, boy, what day is it? Why, it's pledge drive day, sir. Oh, I haven't missed it. I'm as giddy as a schoolboy. That's the feeling. It's the final. The pledge drive is not over. And if I go to KUOW.org right now, I can be a part of it.
Absolutely. Think of Tiny Tim. Think of Tiny Tim, yes. Ladies and gentlemen. What would Tiny Tim want you to do? I think that he would want you to call 206-543-9595. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So are these the things that will happen or only might happen? Spit it. I got to really work on that. But what I'm trying to say is, KUOW is here for you all year long, and we're going to be here in 2023. If we can keep paying the bills. And normally we just take that for granted. I think that's a nice thing about public radio, but you don't have to think about the cogs and the wheels all the time, the how it's done. But once a year, pause and realize that the people, the equipment, the bandwidth, all that kind of stuff, the editors, the producers, the acquired programming like NPR programming, it only happens because people like the folks you've been introducing us to, Mike, they one by one, they invest in it.
Absolutely. And I also want to remind people there's no paywall. So everything that Bill just mentioned, we're able to do that. No paywall. We're giving you podcasts. We're giving you drive time shows. We're giving you reporting. We're giving you NPR. We also like to write articles around here. Any way that you like your news, we are going to deliver it. No paywall. All you got to do is go to KUOW.org and it's all there for you. We need one more listener. It can be you. Oh, you'll be so special. You'll be so special. You'll have your tote bag when you're going to the grocery store. Mm-hmm. You'll have your KUOW beanie. Oh, that can be you. KUOW.org or 206-543-9595.
Son, is that T-shirt still available and hanging in the window? the one with the bear, with a knowledgeable bear and the spectacles. Why, yes, sir. Oh, what a charming boy. Go and get that and bring it to all.
The T-shirts.
Did I basically capture what's happening?
You got it.
When you make a pledge?
And people voted for that T-shirt, Bill. That's the connection that we have with our listeners. They voted for that T-shirt. It is here. And if you want to have it, you can call 206-543-9595 or go to KUOW.org. Help us hit our goal. Get your T-shirt. Tiny Tim is going to be happy. You will no longer be a Scrooge. This is the perfect way to end this year.
Final day of the pledge drive. Mike, thank you for all the reporting and the help convincing folks to make that step. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Bill. I always love my chances to hang out with you.
Me too. KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, and KQOW Bellingham. Thanks for joining us at KUOW.org or 206-543-9595.